One of the most important aspects of the Monster Hunter series is its environments. It's the thing that really sets it apart from its competition. In a sea of so-called Monhun likes, the thing they often consistently miss is the attention to detail in the locales you play in. In Monster Hunter, you're not just fighting in arenas tailored to the monsters. These are actual locations within the world of Monster Hunter, and the monsters live in them. I'm sure everyone watching this video has stopped to smell the roses at some point while playing Monster Hunter, to stop chasing the monster for a moment and just take in the sights around you, taking note of the local small monsters, the plants, or lack thereof, the vistas you can see in the skybox or in the distant terrain. Monster Hunter has always sought to create an immersive world and has only gotten better at it over time, increasing the amount of detail you can see and the freedom you have to explore it. All these things strongly contribute to the atmosphere of Monster Hunter, the kind of vibe you get when you're out in the field. And through diverse locations, they've created many serene, mysterious, and sometimes even unsettling moments to be found if you look for them. Today I'd like to take a walk through some of Monster Hunter's visitable locations and make note of some of these interesting places. We'll be talking about at least one place in every generation, so get your hiking boots on and let's explore the beauty of nature. Our first stop on our journey is the jungle from Generation 1. Gen 1 jungle has always had a really interesting vibe to me. It's one of the only maps to play with obstructing visibility in the series. The mess of vines and various plants can actually hinder your ability to see clearly, which is really fitting for a jungle map. Right off the bat, when loading in at camp, you're treated to a really incredible view. One that's kind of easy to miss even, because the camera starts facing away from it, and the box and exits out of the room never have you look towards it. You get a really crazy sense of scale from here. The huge waterfalls and the distant mountains way out there, as well as the low-lying areas in the valley. If you angle the camera just right, you can see there's even further waterfalls and valleys in other jungle areas. Anyway, this isn't what we're actually here for. Let's get going. The jungle is one of the maps that has a lot of these ancient ruin type things in it. It adds to some of the mysterious vibe, like this was a place that was once settled by people, but now it's just completely reclaimed by nature. It's hard to get an idea of the geography here, but there does seem to be an implication that this giant river and waterfall lead down into this hollow of Room 8. This is our destination. This is such a fascinating room, completely surrounded by waterfalls, filled with a shallow pool of water that presumably drains through connecting caves. We have these strange little lobster guys that hang out here and nowhere else. And most intriguing of all is the walls of the room. You might initially think that the texturing of these walls gives the impression of rocks that are covered with moss and algae from all the water. But then look over here. Roots or some kind of tree branch formation? It's very strange. It almost makes you feel like you're inside a giant hollow tree, but given the size, it would surely be visible from the adjacent room, yet it's not. Just what kind of place is this? You can see what is probably that waterfall from the previous room over there through that crack in the wall. This place is just so strikingly unusual. It's the type of vibe that can really only be accomplished with the old-gen room divides too. This kind of inscrutable map geography wouldn't be possible in one of the modern, more open and detailed maps. Just one of the many wonders of the old-gen world. On to our next location. Now we arrive at a place I don't think I've ever mentioned or featured on this channel before, the Great Forest. A map from, well, Frontier, but it's also in Freedom Unite, which is where we're at now. This is a really cool map. One of the best old-gen maps in my opinion. Compared to the jungle, this map is actually quite geographically consistent, which I think makes it stand out a bit among the old-gen maps. As you spawn in here, you can see the giant tree in the distance. This view you have here is actually overlooking the whole explorable map. You can see we have this kind of higher vantage point overlooking the lower forest area, and if we move to the next room, we are down in that area we were just looking down at. I really love the ambient sounds in this map, all the bugs and birds and other wildlife. It makes the map feel really full of life, even though in these old maps they didn't have the same kind of populous endemic life that we're accustomed to in the newer games. But yeah, you can see we're basically at the foot of that giant tree now, and we can explore some of these surrounding areas. If we move up into Area 5, we can get an even closer look at the tree's roots and see that they're kind of gnarled and extend out over this little clearing, which is pretty cool. I feel like I'm kind of giving a tour of this map, but there's probably a lot of people who haven't seen this map at all, since it's only in this game and Frontier, so it's fine. I like the skybox over here as well, again showing some more of this area we were looking down at in the beginning. You can get a better idea of the kinds of elevation the forest has from here. Obviously, we're pretty high up on these cliffs around the tree. The tree itself seems to be on some kind of raised, rocky platform. But out there you can see a lot of hills and valleys, all completely covered in trees. The tree coverage in this forest is extremely dense. If you look up in most of the areas, you can see the kind of canopy above you. I'd like to imagine that if this map were in Tri with its lighting system, some of the areas of this map would actually be somewhat dark due to the canopy of trees being so thick. I think that would look really cool. Anyway, moving on, we have one of my favorite rooms in this map. The ambient sound actually changes completely here. We have this serene little pond. This room is really interesting. We've actually moved quite far from where we just were. You can see the giant tree obscured by the trees and fog through here, and that's the top of the tree. We're very high up, and quite a ways away now. This is an excellent spot for a bit of fishing as well. I kind of wonder if they intentionally make a lot of the fishing spots these kind of peaceful and pretty areas, since you'll probably be spending some time in there trying to catch the fish you want. Anyway, now we can move back down toward the tree, and go check out the actual reason we came to this map. Behold the Tree Cave. The tree in the middle actually houses this huge, hollowed-out area beneath it. This is the major monster den of the area as well, so many small monsters call it home. And you can find some large monsters here as well during quests. And finally, we have this. We'll have to be careful here, it's quite dangerous. The Shakalaka Den. And the King Shakalaka. I believe this is literally the only Shakalaka Den in the series, and outside of the extremely specific requirements of spawning him in Dose, it's the only way to easily see the King Shakalaka and fight him. I love all the little details in this room. They have these dens dug into the walls, but they also have this little house they've built. Presumably that's the king's home. It really distinguishes the Shakalaka from the felines in the way they live and maintain their territory. That concludes our Great Forest trip. Misty Peaks is our next stop. Alright, we're here in the wonderful world of Portable Third, starting at the camp of the Misty Peaks. We'll take a walk through a few rooms on the way to our destination, as usual of course, and see what we can see. Before that though, the Misty Peaks is a map I'd say is one of the first that they really wanted people to appreciate the beauty of. The skybox in basically every single room is extremely good looking. They rendered a surprising amount of detail way out into the distance. You've got the light streaming in through the clouds, the distant waterfalls going down the mountains. It's like a painting. I always love to note the tortoise here. I love the little low poly, low frame rate animals you can find in some maps. Very reminiscent of the lobsters from the jungle. One of the more striking features of this map is the various ruins you'll find scattered throughout. These aren't like the ancient ruins of the jungle. These look like buildings from a village that was abandoned in more recent history, perhaps after monsters tore through. You can still see the stone pathways that would have snaked around the buildings. And these buildings here, stuck in the dirt, sort of give the impression of some kind of landslide or collapse of a wall. In the next room, we've got something that I think is really funny. As you walk in, you can catch these little floating things in the water, and I think they're supposed to be some, like, ducks or some other kind of bird floating by. But they're so low detail, it's actually kind of hard to tell. They almost just look like pieces of grass or debris. Usually the background endemic life PNGs they put in are just high enough detail that you can still identifiably tell what they are. But these are really low detail. Love that for them. I too wish to be a low-detail duck floating by on the water. In this room up ahead, we have another pretty scenic view. You're obviously drawn firstly to the waterfall in the back, but note the falling leaves as well. There's these big trees hanging over the room. I think this adds a nice ambiance. The waterfall, of course, is quite striking as well. Not a very large one like some of the others we've seen, but this one has one of the best features a waterfall in a game can have. Cave behind it. Is there any greater pleasure? And of course, from this side, you can see the backside of water. I love this cave because of this strange little tune that plays in the background. There's several rooms in the series that have, well, I wouldn't call it music, but it's some sort of instrumental sound rather than just the ambient noise of the environment. I think the sparse usage of this adds a lot of mystique to these rooms. The rock formation down there is also really cool. Not a ton of stuff to note in this room, just more of these ruins. This one seems to be some kind of shrine. And finally, we arrive at our destination. Note the ambient wind sound as we cross the bridge, and the way it sort of sways. Once we step off the bridge, the wind goes away. A really excellent use of localized sound. I like this room a lot because it's one of those places that's sort of out of the way, and doesn't have much reason to visit it. You've got the bamboo shoots here for that one quest, and the elder, but that's basically it. You usually just run right through it without paying it much mind. But look how cozy it is. These little corners tucked away behind the bamboo. Also, look at these odd rocks. Is this another ruin of some kind? These rocks don't look like natural shapes. Anyway, off to the next location we go. The Deserted Island. This has got to be one of the best maps in the series, I think. Certainly one of my favorites. We can, of course, appreciate the skybox. Higher fidelity here in 3rd gen now. No more low-quality PNG backgrounds. Really incredible visuals here. Not a cell phone in sight. So we actually have 2 stops here. Mainly one destination and a little pit stop along the way. I really love the diversity of environments here. We've got these open, grassy areas down here. The northeastern area has the caves, and then in the northern and western areas, there's the water rooms. It really adds to the sense of scale, like you're really traveling all over the island, not just to one small part of it. I love the sound effects at night here. I think when looking at maps like this, you can really get a sense of where they wanted to head with the design of the series in the future. Like, philosophically, this map isn't far removed from maps from World, for example. It's just technologically held back. It gives the impression of a large, sprawling area full of life without being able to represent it literally. I think they've always sought to do that even from the beginning, but 3rd gen is where you can really see the gap starting to close and notice how they got from old gen to the newer gen styles. Anyway, over here is our first stop. Now there's not a whole lot to visually see here, but that's kind of the point. There's this basically totally dark alcove here that just has a bunch of bugs in it. I think there might be a couple of gathering nodes here, but that's it. I think places like this are just so cool. Areas that are essentially pointless. There's not really a reason why this room should exist gameplay-wise, but it makes sense that it's here. It's a cave connecting a couple of other cave areas. It's just part of the location. It doesn't need to have a justification for existing, other than it makes sense that it's here. It's a little cave you pass through on your way from one place to the next. Things like this add a lot of underappreciated depth to a location in a game, I think. Okay, let's head to our final destination. Take note of the cool perspective here. Into the drink. And here we are. Despite 3 being the underwater game, this is actually one of the few ways you can really see the vastness of the ocean from underwater. It stretches out beyond the view distance, kind of unsettling even, honestly. You can imagine a Legiacris swimming out from the murky depths into view. And from here, of course, you can peer into Laggy's den. I find Laggy's den kind of unsettling as well, with its high walls that recede into the darkness of the cave. There's even this faint droning sound in the ambient noise, if you listen carefully, that almost sounds like a Minecraft cave noise. Yikes! Let's get out of here and on to the next location. The Jurassic Frontier of Generations Ultimate. Inching ever closer to the modern day. And with that comes an increase in the amount of detail you can find in the environments as the tech begins to catch up. GU is interesting, of course, because it is playing homage to many of the older gen games, and reimagines many locations from them in higher fidelity. We can see this even in this map. Despite being brand new to this game, it still feels a lot like an old gen map. The skybox here is highly reminiscent of sites you can see in Forest and Hills and other Gen 1 and 2 maps, for example. The mountains in the distance, the rivers running through the valley. Something I literally never noticed before making this video is that if you look very closely, those little dots way out in the distance in the valley are actually Aptonoth grazing in the grass. Extremely small and clearly using the same low detail 2D looping animation from Gen 1 Forest and Hills. I think that's awesome. Anyway, let's get a move on. I actually don't have any particular destination in mind here, I just thought there's stuff to see in this map. I've never actually paid much attention to the scenery here. I think something interesting about this map is how volcanic it seems to be. This is a pretty good vantage point to see that you're literally surrounded by smoking volcanoes. check that out. PNG Laranoth sliding through the grass out there. I always find these rooms pretty interesting. There's a few throughout the series, places where the remnants of destroyed camps can be found. It makes you wonder how often that's a problem for hunters, trying to head to an area and finding out that the camp you've been using has been destroyed and now monsters live there. I guess Wild sort of tried to replicate that with its camp system where monsters can destroy them. Coming down here, we can see the Jurassic Frontier has more than just grassy valleys and volcanoes. There's this kind of fungal undergrowth area which we can drop down into. Very strange place. The plants here are totally unique. And finally, the deepest part of this area, with what I assume most people already know about, the Shen Gaoren skeleton, embedded into the wall. These pulsating fungal growths kind of freak me out. And so here's a bit of a baffling layout. We climb up the mountains to the cliff, we jump way down to the bottom of the fungal valley, we climb back up, and now we fall down into this room to end up back at the surface level. Not sure what's going on there. Really big fan of the serene jungle area with the light streaming down through the thick canopy. Other than that one strange aspect, I think the geography here is pretty consistent. When looking at a loading zone, you can pretty directly see the connection between the room you're in and where you're going. Well, I think we've seen everything there is to see here. Farewell, Jurassic Frontier. Off we go. As we move from 4th gen into 5th gen, and the modern era of the series, I think it's interesting to discuss how the change in map design also influenced the general atmosphere of the games. Maps, of course, became significantly more detailed. They were able to portray the denseness of the jungles and the vastness of the deserts more literally. They were able to pack the maps with more monsters, small monsters and endemic life, to make them literally full of life that you could actually see instead of just imagine from the ambiance. But that can also come at a cost. That lack of need to imagine things can at times reduce the immersion of the maps. When looking at a loading zone from one room to the next, and then going through and looking back at where you came from, there is an implied distance. Physically, you just teleported from one room to the next, but you can infer that you actually traveled some distance. We've seen this several times on our journey in this video, where two rooms don't seem to visually match up in terms of how they're connected. They must not actually be directly connected, but rather you just traveled through various other joined areas to get there. This is different from the newer maps, where maps are seamless and you can travel from room to room and across the map with no loading zones. The sense of scale is physical instead of imagined. But that means the maps can feel a bit smaller. Every room is in fact joined by a short hallway or passage. What you're able to imagine is always going to be greater than what can actually be represented in the game. They're never going to make a map that takes you a real-life hour to cross. But you can certainly imagine the hours it takes your character to cross the map in the old games, because they can convey that. Getting back on course, we're here at the Citadel from Sunbreak. I think this map is pretty unique because of how varied its areas are. You've got the castle area, a forest area, a swamp, and an icy mountain. It's a little gamey, obviously, since this type of layout for an environment is nonsensical, but I think as a playable space, it's really cool. I think one of the more interesting things you can do in Rise maps is to actually go off the beaten path, away from the main rooms and hallways you're meant to traverse. For example, we're going to hop down here. I think it's easy to miss the little details on these maps if you're used to just going from camp right to the monster like normal. This little stream runs quite a distance through the map, and there's really nothing of particular interest down here beyond a few gathering nodes. On the way through, you can find a fishing spot overlooking the ocean. You can see a few out-of-bounds details of the surrounding ruins here. And just a little further along, there's the hidden passageway that leads up into the castle area. And finally, it ends at this little waterfall. Despite the destruction and dilapidated structures that surround this area, you can tell this stream was always a natural feature here, with this little wooden pier overlooking it. And this isn't the end for how much you can explore this particular water feature. If we go to the subcamp, it'll put us closer to the top. Notably, we're higher up here, and there's this sort of small pond that drifts off that way. Perhaps this is actually the source of the waterfall. If we take this rather windy and roundabout path, we'll end up right near the top of where the waterfall starts. I don't think you can get all the way to the top to see exactly where it comes from, but this offers us a pretty nice vista overlooking the ruined castle. A fitting end to our journey in the Citadel. Finally, at the end of our journey, we find ourselves in the Scarlet Forest of Wilds. Here in Wilds, we reach the pinnacle of leaving nothing to the imagination. Maps in Wilds are something of a technical marvel for how much incredible detail they were able to pack into them. Now, the environments in Wilds change based on time and season, so we can't see every detail in one trip, but let's go see what we can find for now. Immediately, right out of the gate, we're met with the incredible amount of dense foliage and insects. You may even spot some woodwoods out and about occasionally. You're never far from some kind of small monster here, which I think is cool. Depending on what area you're in, you'll find various monsters flying overhead or in the water. When you're in the Scarlet Forest, you've always got to visit the Woodwood Hideout and say hello. Much like the Shakalaka of the Great Forest, I love to see how the various other societies in the Monhun world live. With the Woodwoods specifically, you can observe a higher amount of detail in how they go about their time. I find the elevation of the Scarlet Forest to be very interesting. There's high areas you can climb to through the trees and vines, but then there's also the lower forest floor where all the water collects and runs off. As we get to the higher elevations, we can find waterfalls. The sound design here is incredible. It sounds like a real waterfall as you approach. And finally, we come to my favorite spot in all of Wilds. Look at this incredible view. You can see some sort of strange structure out there. Looks like a plant of some kind. Some strange type of tree, perhaps. And of course, all the way on the far side, you can see some of these ancient stone structures up close with an interesting pattern on them. There's what looks like a collapsed piece of stone between them, so maybe long ago this was an arch or something of that sort. It's hard to tell just from how old and overgrown everything is. I think this is a fine place to end our journey. The world of Monster Hunter, from the beginning, has been full of atmosphere and immersion, if you are willing to stop and appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed our little hike as much as I have, and let me know what some of your favorite areas in Monster Hunter are as well. Thanks for watching. See ya.